This is part 2 to last week's 5 problems I faced after I left my Nazi lifestyle behind. To recap, here's the 5 issues I faced when leaving behind the world of white supremacy. 1. A distorted view of myself. 2. Shame and guilt. 3. Not being able to properly recognize red flags. 4. Trusting the wrong people. And 5. The weightlessness of no longer carrying that cross. These issues showed up in more ways than one. Not being able to properly recognize red flags wasn't just in friendships. It flowed to my romantic relationships as well. Shame and guilt over this part of my life often made me feel like I was in the wrong in any given situation, whether or not I was. The weightlessness of no longer carrying a cross built a desperate attempt to find purpose in anything I did. There are more examples of this, but you get the idea. Finding the solutions to these problems took some time. Even then, the problems continued in other areas of life where they popped up. It was annoying, but after some time, I found 5 solutions to the 5 problems I faced after I left my Nazi lifestyle behind, and further, how my neo-Nazi days benefited me. First, shadow work was my solution to a distorted view of myself. Shadow work is a modern umbrella term for deep inner psychological work. This can mean going into your own psyche to determine what your childhood created for you. The triggers, the ways your parents treated you, the responses you built from those childhood circumstances. It can also mean reviewing a traumatic situation and seeing how it plays out in your life, regardless of when it happened, childhood or not. Shadow work is often messy, emotional, frightening, and can be traumatic in and of itself. Though, if done honestly and realistically, it will give you the tools you need to adapt to your new reality. A reality where you are not dictated by the traumas you endured, but aware of yourself and in total control of your actions at all times. There are 4 levels of consciousness. This is an entire video by itself, and now that I think of it, I should probably make one. The 4 levels of consciousness are this. Unconsciously incompetent. You're doing it wrong, and you don't know you're doing it wrong. Consciously incompetent. You're doing it wrong, but you're aware you're doing it wrong. Consciously competent. You're doing it right, and you're actively thinking about doing it right. Unconsciously competent. You're doing it right and not even consciously aware of it. When you do shadow work, you become consciously aware of your innermost issues, moving from unconsciously incompetent to consciously incompetent. You can't fix a problem if you don't know what that problem is. Shadow work was my medicine for having a distorted view of myself, generated in part from my former neo-Nazi days. Second, the only remedy to shame and guilt, accepting myself, was my solution. Call it naivety, call it delusion. I wasn't fully aware of how alarming being involved in the world of white supremacy was to people who didn't have backgrounds like that. I genuinely didn't understand it. As I saw it, that part of my life was in my past. It didn't matter to my present and future. Not everyone I knew agreed with that. Some made it known, and those who did created a sense of shame and guilt in me that wasn't originally there. Maybe it was needed, a necessary part of the exit process. I don't know if I'd say leaving that community meant my sense of empathy and compassion was fixed, so perhaps the shame and guilt helped build that. In 2015 or 2016, I was watching TV and flipping through the channels. I came across the September 11th memorial at the Twin Towers site. Watching the families walk up to this podium and read off the names of their departed kept my attention. It didn't take long, but I started to tear up. I felt sad for what these people went through. All of them, regardless of race. I watched the program for over an hour. When I was done, I remember thinking about my neo-Nazi days. I didn't have that ability when I was involved. I could have not felt that kind of compassion for the victims of 9/11 and their families because human life as a whole didn't hold value to me. Now it did, and I could finally accept that I had grown that part in me. Of course, the work wasn't done, it never is, but still, having the ability to empathize with random people like that showed me I could accept that although I once was cold, I was much warmer in comparison. I was at least on the path to the steps I needed to take. And that experience, seeing the Twin Towers Memorial, showed me that. Third solution, not being able to recognize red flags in other people, was fixed by recognizing my own red flags. Combined with the others, this required deep inner work. I had to figure out what my triggers were and then how I was responding to those triggers. Like most men, I often responded with anger or annoyance, regardless of how I actually felt. Not being emotionally intelligent was a major red flag that took years to address. But when you have a problem and learn how to fix it, you see that issue more in others. For example, I once lost 80 pounds. When I was at my lowest weight, I saw obese people differently than I had before. Figuring out the problem in myself made me wonder why others had not. It was judgmental, true, but it did happen. It'll be no different once you do shadow work. Another red flag I had to recognize was my own toxic shyness. We generally don't think of shyness as a toxic behavior, but this was there in childhood and resurfaced after my neo-Nazi days. During the period, I felt shame and guilt over this part of my past. I didn't want to be seen, because I was worried if people knew of this part of my past, they would judge me harshly. It made me feel like I needed to be in the background. Addressing this has done wonders for my professional and personal life. Recognizing your own red flags isn't an enjoyable experience. However, it will help you recognize the negative traits you carry in others. So say you want to be a more honest person. You'll notice others lying like you do. This form of taking accountability will dramatically help you, if you can pay attention. Which easily rolls me into my next point, number 4. A better community was my solution to trusting the wrong people. Leaving the Nazi communities and friends behind left me with nowhere to go but up, which is exactly what happened. Still, you look for what you know is comfortable. If your friends have always been drug addicts, you'll find drug addicts to befriend even in a different environment. If you've always hung around criminals, you'll find more crime in a different place. After I left that world, I went back to college and joined a fraternity. My fraternity brothers were worlds apart from the former community I was involved in. Young, often nerdy, often virgin guys became my new friends as we all chased swarty girls down. I also entered the tattoo and piercing industry as a piercing artist at this time. Almost immediately, I found and became close to drug users and lowlifes of that world. I got closer to them, they became closer to me, and in one way or another, things ended up in a car crash-like manner between us due to mutually held toxic behavior. Along with being able to properly recognize red flags in myself and others, my community eventually became a supportive one. Before it got to that point, many towers in my life had to fall down. Again and again, I learned the same lessons over and over. The same mistakes were made by me until I finally woke up and realized I was often digging my own grave. My circle has always been relatively smaller and still is. The people who are close to me are highly valued and I feel I get the same in return. Now, back then, not a chance. 5th, the weightlessness of no longer carrying a cross was found in new purpose and direction in life. This purpose has changed over the years. At the time, it was go back to college and redirect my life in a new direction that didn't involve a swastika. It was getting my apprenticeship as a piercing artist. It was finding new friends and communities filled with people who were going somewhere productive in their lives. No longer having the neo-Nazi lifestyle, community, and philosophy to fall back on, I had to rebuild a lot of my habits and processes. This took years before I'd say I got it any kind of right. Even still, with the shift in worldview, I had to shift my actions and thought process. I couldn't hold onto the old while trying to embrace something new. Of course, because no one is perfect and I didn't have the mindset I have today, I made a lot of mistakes. Mistakes I want to work with others on so they can move forward in their lives. For example, I thought when I was a skinhead that being aggressive was just another way of being assertive. They are not the same. Aggression is forcing your will upon others, whereas assertive is holding your will for yourself. One imposes beliefs, the other upholds beliefs. One imposes beliefs, the other upholds your own. Finding this new cross to carry came in various forms over the years. Once it was education, then career, then my personal brand, and in another 5, 10, 15 years, it will change again and again. From my career and brand to a family, or from my career and brand to my passion projects. To recap, I found 5 solutions to the 5 problems I faced after I left the world of white supremacy. The issues were: 1. A distorted view of myself. 2. Shame and guilt. 3. Not being able to properly recognize red flags. 4. Trusting the wrong people. And 5. The weightlessness of no longer carrying a cross. The solutions were: 1. Shadow work. 2. Accepting myself. 3. Recognizing my own red flags. 4. A better community. 5. Finding purpose and direction. Self-growth is a never-ending phenomenon and always will be. My path forward will change over the years, and it will cycle different purposes throughout it. Either way, the solutions I found provided me with tools I will use to navigate my life forward. The issues I faced in my neo-Nazi days will always be there in one way or another, as everyone struggles with these issues from time to time. But I am now equipped to navigate my way out of it. I have the tools, the skill set, the mindset to ensure I don't end up in that same place. I can do the same for you. Hit me up today and let's get you forward.